Welcome to the Reinventing Transport Show, the international podcast that helps you push for better urban mobility and better cities. Today I'm talking with Shreya Gadepalli about street space reallocation and complete streets. Shreya is Director for South Asia for the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, the international non-profit on sustainable transport. Shreya has been with ITDP since the late 1990s. Lately, she's been guiding their work on various issues, including our topic today, street space redesigns. There's more about Shreya in the show notes at www.reinventingtransport.org, where you can also see some of her striking photographs from the streets of India. I think you'll find Shreya's insights useful, even if you're not in India. Enjoy the interview. Shreya, a warm welcome to the Reinventing Transport podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be on this podcast, Paul. Thanks for inviting me.
Today we'll be talking about street redesigns, sometimes called complete street plans or street space reallocations, focusing on the context of India. My first question about that is, why should people care about reallocating street space in the Indian context?
And that's a very good question. Let me start with some basic statistics here. More than 7 out of 10 trips made in Indian cities as of today are either on foot or on a bicycle or some form of public transportation. When I say public transportation, I'm also including here various forms of informal transit like shared auto rickshaws or minibuses. When it comes to women, that number goes up to as much as 9 out of 10 trips. So 9 out of 10 trips by women are on foot or on public transportation. Now, these are some very large numbers. And if that's the case, is our infrastructure reflective of that? And the answer is clearly no. Our infrastructure is far from it, where less than 1% of streets in urban India actually have footpaths. There's practically no infrastructure for cycling. And the majority of space is hogged by personal motor vehicles, that's cars and motorcycles, even though they account for less than a quarter of all trips made. And especially when it comes to cars, that number is less than 10% of all trips made. Therefore, it's important that we make sure that our streets are equitable, they're safe, and they efficiently service the needs of people.
So I guess when people are looking at the streets in a city like Delhi or even Mumbai, they gain the impression of the importance of the modes of transport from the space that they are taking, even if they're moving very, very few people.
That's right. And therefore, when you ask this question as to how many people actually use cars, oftentimes people are confused and they think that maybe about 50% of people actually have access to cars. And that number is more like 5%, not 50%.
When we're redesigning these streets, a lot of these street reallocations have been taking space from mixed traffic, which motorists feel as though is taking space from them and giving it dedicated space, whether it's to buses, footpaths, bicycle space. Realistically, if we were godlike in our wisdom, we would say the most efficient thing would be to give most of it to the more space-efficient modes, but that's not politically realistic. So what, in fact, is happening in the street designs that ITDP has been suggesting?
So ITDP really started this whole idea, if you will, of complete streets in Indian cities with the Better Streets, Better Cities guide for street design in Indian cities. And this was way back in 2010, 2011 when we published this document, just seminal in nature because till then there was no document which actually spoke about how to design streets, especially in the Indian context. Since then, we've been working with multiple cities, and as of now, we work with close to about 20 cities across India on how to design complete streets, essentially streets for all, streets that are safe, that are equitable, and they're efficient in how they service the needs of people. Multiple cities have come forward, but I would really want to take the examples of Chennai and Pune, which in my opinion are really at the top. Chennai became the first Indian city to adopt a policy for streets which says that non-motorized transportation, that is walking and cycling, are the priority of the city, and that's where they'll allocate most of their funds. So the policy actually explicitly says that over 60% of the money that the city will spend on transportation will go towards improving walking and cycling infrastructure, that the city would actually have zero deaths of pedestrians and cyclists in the city, and these happen to be one of the largest numbers. Chennai happens to be a fairly unsafe city. I'll talk about the safety numbers in a bit, but safety is a big issue in Indian cities. And Chennai said, we want to make sure that our city becomes safer and much, much safer than it is right now. And also have very clear metrics as to how many streets would have safer walking and cycling infrastructure. They essentially said that practically all streets which are larger than 12 meters in width would have safer walking and cycling environments. So, and the city really has been following up with this policy.
There's obviously a lot of momentum in the wrong direction in many cities, and I imagine Chennai has big road projects and others, but this is a remarkable change in their goals. And so you're saying that it really is being followed through. That's very encouraging.
That's right. So since it has adopted the policy, nearly 60 kilometers of streets have been retrofitted with better walking and cycling environments, better footpaths. And the city, as we speak, is also redesigning and implementing close to about 100 kilometers. Its goal is to eventually redesign close to about 500 kilometers of what are called bus route roads. That's essentially any street on which there is a bus should have better walking environment because there's a strong connection between public transportation and walking.
Is bus priority part of the story in Chennai too?
Yes, it is. The city is actually now developing a detailed plan for a bus rapid transit system, which will have priority for buses on dedicated central lanes, along with a host of other features that would make the possibility of having a metro, if you will, with buses, a metro bus in some senses, as cities like Mexico City have or Bogota.
Some listeners may be aware that some of India's experience with BRT has been rather unhappy. For example, the Delhi BRT, which was derailed, so to speak, by opposition from certain groups. How is it that Chennai has been able to set these very ambitious goals for non-motorized transport and actually reallocate quite significant funding and road space to the space-efficient and majority modes of transport?
I must give a lot of credit to the leadership of the city. The previous commissioner of the city and the present commissioner of the city have been strong proponents of this approach of making streets for all. And that has also been followed through by the team which is there at the municipal corporation. ITDP, incidentally, along with a local university, conducted in-depth training for close to about 90 engineers on how to plan, design, and implement streets for all, or complete streets. And we've also had a fair amount of support coming in from various other stakeholders like local urban designers and architects, as well as resident associations and others. And even the media has been a fairly strong supporter of these activities. Which is not to say that there hasn't been opposition. There has certainly been opposition from different quarters, especially those who use cars who've been unhappy with the fact that they think that space has been taken away from them. But the truth is that the streets have only reallocated to make it slightly more equitable than what they were earlier.
So you're saying that there was a lot of effort that went into coalition building in Chennai?
Absolutely. And Chennai is not the only case. Even Pune, another city that ITDP has had long history with, we've been there in Pune for now 8 years. And we essentially did the same thing. We created a coalition along with various other local civil society organizations, with the local media groups, and with the support of the municipal corporation, which has had fairly progressive leadership over this period. The city became the first to have street design guidelines of its own, adopted a policy which makes pedestrians and cyclists its priority, and has now even created a dedicated cell for bicycle and street design planning within the municipal corporation. And the city has also been following this through. As we speak, the city is retrofitting about 125 kilometers of streets. Some of the pilots that have already been done have one of the best quality pieces of infrastructure of walking and cycling anywhere in the country so far. And these have inspired many other cities. ITDP also does a lot of cross-connection, peer-to-peer learning exercises. We've brought officers from various cities of Tamil Nadu and other states down to Pune to show how good quality infrastructure could be created. And now 10 cities of Tamil Nadu, under the aegis of the state government, with technical support from ITDP, are preparing their citywide complete streets plans.
So this is fascinating because for an outsider, they may gain the impression that it was the technical sort of advice in your guide that was crucial. But in fact, it's an interesting combination of the technical information and politics, right? Street space seems to be a matter where power, politics, vested interests are really important, and there's just no choice but to actually get active, get organized, form coalitions to make things happen, even against some opposition.
Absolutely. And, the truth is that people who walk often come from the lowest strata of the society, and often who are voiceless, or the same goes for cyclists as well. But the good news is that they have been very strong proponents in the civil society who have become their voice. And the media also has been fairly supportive of this initiative to make streets safer and fairer.
When it comes to replicating the success in places where these things are happening, I mean, ITDP can't be everywhere. So I wonder what would be your advice to local advocates or people within government who want to make this happen?
I would say the data is a very important point. Oftentimes people don't see pedestrians or cyclists or even bus users are invisible because of the fact that when you just see a street, and in a typical Indian street, all you see more or less is cars and motorcycles. And therefore, one is in an illusion that these modes are the main modes of transportation, when actually it's buses and walking, which are a much larger mode of transportation, along with informal transit. So it's to first get data, make data a weapon, if you will, and use this data to make a case as to why streets should be designed the way they should be designed. The second thing, join forces. Let this not be just an individual effort, but a community effort where people like urban designers, where advocates and neighborhood associations, everybody comes together and demands for streets which are for people rather than for cars.
That's very encouraging in some ways, and in other ways sobering, because there's a lot of hard work involved in this organizing effort, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's not easy, and it's always hard to come together. But what we've seen in multiple cities happening does make me feel positive about this. And it's not just cities that ITDP has been working in, even other cities like Bangalore, I think, is a good example where multiple streets have been redesigned to a fairly high quality with focus on pedestrians. And the city really seems to be going forward in the right direction. It's supported by the state government as well.
Anyone who's been following this issue internationally would have come across the term tactical urbanism. Have you come across that set of tactics in India? For example, the idea of using temporary pilots with temporary materials to demonstrate what something will look like and help to persuade people that this is something that would work for them.
Tactical urbanism has been a strong component of our work in multiple cities, whether it be Chennai or Pune or Coimbatore, and even other cities like Ranchi and Nashik. Actually, we use tactical urbanism to make a case for why streets should have wider footpaths in Pune and in Chennai, which has now led to an entire street, a high street in the middle of Chennai, which is being pedestrianized. So this street, which is close to 24 to 30 meters in width, would only have lanes for buses amongst motorized vehicles, and the remaining right of way would be entirely for pedestrians and cyclists and people who just want to enjoy public space.
Sometimes I think about places that have moved in the right direction to encourage space efficient and majority kinds of transport. And very often the story seems to be that the difference between success and failure was getting to the point of having places that people loved, that they wanted to protect from traffic. Do you think Indian cities have enough places that people really love within their cities that they would then be willing to make these efforts to protect them from traffic?
I think it's getting there. It's not definitely not the norm, but it's getting there. And a lot of what I was heartening to see is that there are lots of individual efforts in multiple cities where a local architect or an urban designer has joined forces with the local municipal authority to pilot what a better street would look like, either improving the quality of footpaths or in some cases pedestrianizing that entire area. And this is a fairly positive sign, the direction in which the cities are going. And I must also point out here that the smart cities mission of the government of India has been a strong support for this agenda for complete streets, if you will, because practically every single city in the country has some component of complete streets under the smart cities mission. Now, one can always debate whether they've gotten it entirely right or not, and there's definitely a lot of effort that needs to be made to make cities more aware about all the components of a complete street and ensure that it gets implemented properly, because it's not just about coalition building. There's a lot of technical work as well. When, for example, underground utilities are not taken care of when redesigning a street, the street very quickly falls into disrepair because of some half-baked maintenance activity which leaves it dug up, and therefore all the effort that's put goes to waste, and in some senses goes down the drain, which does not exist.
That's a very nice segue into my next question, which relates to institutionalizing this progress, because I guess, like in many other countries, so far the positive projects are probably oases in a desert of bad streets or poorly designed streets. So progress would depend on institutionalizing some of the best practice or the better practice, which includes making sure that the various actors that dig up streets and change streets have this as part of their DNA going forward. Can you see a hope to get to that point so that it becomes just standard practice to always follow your guide, for example?
I think it's getting there. I often tell people that there are 4 C's that are involved. The first one is clarity as to what needs to be done. But then that has to be followed up with capital. If you don't have money, then all that good idea goes for nothing. And even if you have the capital, then you need to have the capacity to be able to do it. And lastly, you have to have coordination between various institutions which are there to ensure that work happens properly, but also whatever gets created is managed and kept in high level of workability, if you will, in the future. So there are a few examples, like Pune, I think is very promising, where the city now has a bicycle department. It also has created a street design cell under its roads department. It has hired fresh talent into the municipal corporation to help the city in implementing these projects. But there's also been a process of empanelment. A very key component is to get the right designers on board. And ITDP has been helping training cities on what we call the 8 steps to complete streets, on how exactly you get these things done. Getting the right terms of references, hiring the right designers, having the internal capacity to monitor, engaging public in ensuring that there's support that's built, getting the utilities right, etc., etc. There's a very interesting new publication that we've come out with. It's called the Footpath Fix. You can find it on ITDP in their website. Go check it out. So there are resources out there, and there are practices which now are emerging from multiple cities. Chennai also similarly has an agency which has been created called the Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, under which a lot of the work is being done, under the aegis of which a lot of work is being done, which allows the municipal corporation, for example, to bring the electricity board or the underground utilities or the police department to come together to ensure that whatever gets created is coordinated and done well.
This is really fascinating. I think many listeners who have maybe seen reports from Indian cities in the international media would have the impression of very traffic clogged and polluted places and not be aware that there are some encouraging, maybe small so far, but very encouraging trends and initiatives being taken. Even though I do know quite a bit about what's going on in India, I'm surprised to hear that you are so upbeat and positive.
Yeah. We also have to be upbeat and positive because there's no other way.
Maybe I'll just end with one final question. You've tackled some really important big themes. Is there any final point that you want to make that you want to make sure that the listener remembers about this topic?
I would just say that, Indian cities are now finally realizing the importance of complete streets. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and the issues with capital coordination and capacity. We need to get a lot of these things fixed, but there's positive momentum. There's some good examples which can inspire others, and we need to use data for our case to ensure that cities listen, that other people understand the importance of creating complete streets. There are good signs at the national level as well. ITDP, along with other people, are working with the Indian Roads Congress to improve national guidelines. The guidelines include things like bus rapid transit, parking management, street redesign, street network planning, and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of the foundational activities are happening now, and I see a lot of positive momentum in the next decade.
Well, Shreya, it's been wonderful talking to you. I hope to have you on the show again in the future because there's so much more to talk about. Thank you again, Shreya.
Yeah, sure.
Don't forget, you can always go to reinventingtransport.org for more information, to listen to other episodes, to find out how to subscribe, or to leave a comment, suggestion, or question. Go to reinventingtransport.org. This has been the Reinventing Transport Show, and I'm Paul Barter. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.